making yourself comfortable with forums where people are kind of feeling it out, and eventually start kind of sharing and becoming more natural in the conversation, more natural in what they want to tell you as a colleague or as a leader.
The first thing I talk about with my clients regarding leadership development is trust and the importance of building strong connections. So I always love it when I'm talking with a technology leader who reinforces that point without me even needing to bring it up. On today's episode of the Leadership Launchpad, our guest is Sajid Mohamedy, co-founder of ExoFarm and executive vice president at Nisum, a global digital consulting firm where he has led teams of over 2,000 people delivering large-scale digital and AI solutions. He is a 4-time entrepreneur, and his newest venture, ExoFarm, is seeking to advance next-generation crop and pharmaceutical research. With a background in digital transformation, Sajid brings a unique perspective at the intersection of innovation, sustainability, and real-world impact. As you will see, this discussion is all about the critical importance of leaders to connect with their teams in a way that feels genuine to them. It will help their teams be more productive, more engaged, and I can tell you from personal experience, it solves so many personnel issues. If this is your first time listening to the show, I do want to remind you to make sure you subscribe so you never miss a future episode. And if you are responsible for developing leaders in your organization, I would love to talk with you. Please reach out to me, Matt at bettereverydaystudios.com, so we can figure out what the challenges are that your leaders are facing and see if we can make your leaders better. With that, let's get into the discussion. Sajid, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. What about you?
I'm doing really well. I'm really excited to have you on the podcast because I always like talking to seasoned entrepreneurs, people who have been through things a couple times. We've been talking to a lot of space folks recently on the show, and that's how we got connected because your current venture is something called ExoFarm. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Pleasure to be on. Thanks for having me. So at ExoFarm, we're really building an intelligent platform to accelerate crop and pharmaceutical research from food systems here on Earth all the way through to kind of long duration missions in space, eventually on the moon. But before that, space stations and all the hosts of different applications that we might see. So our platform combines computer vision, AI, automation to help researchers run really high precision trials in really kind of controlled environments. So whether that's optimizing new crop varieties or developing plant-based compounds, we're focused on making the experimentation much faster and smarter and much more scalable. And the idea really came from looking closely at persistent bottlenecks in both ag and pharma research. So in pharma, the discovery pipeline, as we know, is really slow. There's a lot of risk involved. In ag, we're facing, this global food security crisis. So by 2050, we'll need to develop something like 70% more food or produce 70% more food. And that's with less land, less water, a lot of environmental stressors, climate change. So the tools we have in terms of research in both of these sectors really haven't kept pace with AI or robotics, and there's a lot of kind of opportunities there. And as an entrepreneur, I've always been drawn to solving these complex system level challenges. And at ExoFarm, we saw this chance. When I say we, it's me and a team of really smart co-founders with incredible backgrounds in space and plant science, pharma, ag, of course, tech. So together we're applying deep tech to some of the most urgent, what we see as challenges of our time: food
Hmm.
resilience, sustainable medicine, and eventually life beyond Earth. So it's
Yeah.
mission driven, but at the same time, there's a massive commercial opportunity. So it's just really exciting to be at the intersection of these different things.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by the idea and like it for a couple of reasons. One, I think it's always really important for a lot of space technology stuff to have other applications because the kind of the timeline of space development um, is often it always just takes a little bit longer than you expect,
Right.
right? And so if you can have some terrestrial footing, it's really helpful. I know I've over the years I've run across a couple other companies that kind of have that lens that they're doing things. They're solving a problem on Earth, but with the hope of in the future moving into space. And then I
Spot
also
on.
like it. Yeah,
It's funny. It's funny you bring that up because that was one of the first conversations I had when I was getting
yeah,
into this opportunity. I was talking to a seasoned space executive, and it was like the timelines are long, and where are the
yeah.
applications on Earth? And I think that's what was really compelling about this is we're solving challenges that we eventually can leverage for space and maybe leverage back from space to
Mm-hmm.
Earth,
Yep.
but humanity is right now here, so we have
Yeah.
to address the
Yeah.
challenges here first. So,
Yeah. Exactly.
yeah,
Yeah, and the other reason I really like it is because I used to always say when I was at SpaceX, and still it's not quite as true anymore, but it's been true for a long time, is that SpaceX is going to figure Starship out, and then there's going to be nothing to put in it because nobody believed that it was going to happen. I feel like the last year now there's definitely been some setbacks more recently, but I think the last year has kind of put to rest any idea that it's not going to get figured out.
right,
It's going to at least like super heavy lift at an affordable price is going to happen,
gonna
and
happen. Yeah.
that's going to unlock a lot of stuff. So it's always great to talk to folks like you who are kind of preparing for that massive opening of the space economy, which is really great.
So much disruption, right? From the way
Yeah,
they think about systems, the engineering, to the use cases and what's going to be possible. I don't think anyone's ready. You're right, and
yeah,
we're scratching at it a little bit, and a lot of other players are too. But
yeah,
there's a lot that's going to happen there. It's
yeah.
fascinating stuff.
Absolutely. Well, shifting into some of your background, because you're, like I said, you're kind of a serial entrepreneur. You've been with a lot of companies and a lot of companies that have scaled as well. And so I'd love to start, bringing it back into kind of leadership and your journey of leadership. For you personally, when you've been in these companies that have really scaled, I think, the company that you're at, that you're working at now, you were there from pretty early on. Like, what are some of the challenges for you that you've seen as a leader as you've been inside companies that have scaled?
Yeah. So the company that you're referring to is Nisum, where we went through really several phases of rapid growth from a boutique consulting firm to a global organization, a team of over 2,000 people, and 7 countries now, multiple continents. So the growth wasn't just about hiring more people or landing more clients. It really forces you to grow up as a person, as an organization, and there are moments in time where there are big jumps that happen. Right. So COVID, I think, was for everyone.
Yeah, that was a big one.
That was a big one. It just forced everyone to on the streets, get their call it MBAs or management rotation and all together. But we saw that or moments like that multiple times over the last 15 or so years that I've been a part
Okay.
of NISM. And really, what I saw is the need for stronger systems, much clearer roles, much more intentional leadership. So
Yeah.
it was going from recognizing that it's not just that you are revealing gaps in things that are that are occurring, but you're creating gaps. So what worked when you were at 50 people, 100 people, certainly doesn't work when you're at
Mm,
500 people. It certainly doesn't work when you're at 2,000 people. So communication has to scale. You have to understand as a leader, or I've had to understand as a leader how I can be effective in communicating in a close way, in a way that resonates for a lot of people across a lot of different geographies, a lot of different cultures, but is scalable. So making
interesting.
communication scale, and it's this constant reinforcement of culture, reinforcement of your mission and what we're about, why we are about it. So whenever I talk to new folks coming into the company, and when I'm having discussions with folks along the way, we talk a lot about being builders and how Nisum, even though we are a now mature organization, a lot more people, how can you have a builder's mindset and always think in an entrepreneurial way, but that kind of becomes an abstract concept. So it's about, for me, I try to encourage people to think, okay, you went from actually going in, especially as they're coming up through management roles, you went from being very hands-on to being much more of an enabler. So as you're, building a house or you're building anything, you go from holding the tools themselves, hammering the nails in, to sitting back and making sure your team is doing a good job, providing them the safety to do it, making sure that there's governance around it, understanding how you can check on the work without getting in the way. And I think that's really kind of a big mindset shift that needs to
Yeah.
happen, and allowing people to be empowered.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a number. I love all that you just said. There's a couple things I want to zoom in on and kind of pick apart there because I think there's some really interesting things there. I love the way you started of this idea of the growth opens gaps, and how you as a leader have to kind of transition. The example that you gave is kind of how you communicate, because you're now communicating with a broader range of people, whether it's communications or others. Do you have any examples of things that you remember of like gaps that opened up as Nisum went through these different phases of growth, or different phases of kind of the maturity of the company?
Yeah, I think one of the big things that happens is going from a what feels like an extended family unit
Mm-hmm.
to a grown-up organization.
Okay.
So before founders-led organization, any founders-led organization, you have a direct link and access to the founder, the executive team. There's a sense of, there's a real high sense of purpose and enthusiasm around the idea of the business itself. And I think that is something that has to evolve when suddenly you're scaling. As a leader, you truly do care about people on the front lines because they are such an integral part of driving your business, and they're making your business happen. But it's not always clear to them, and it's about finding ways to communicate that
Mm.
in an effective way and in a consistent way.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it gets. You have to be. I think where a lot of leadership suggestions and concepts kind of go sideways is trying to use a one size fits all model. It
Yep.
really comes down to your personal style and your
Yep.
personal set of values, and what
Yeah.
works even for me as a leader may be very different than what works with my peer
Yeah.
in the same company. So
Yeah.
it's tapping into that, and I don't think there's a one size fits all where you
Yeah.
know some leaders do one-on-ones and some don't, and there's the pendulum's been swinging, right? What does Nvidia do versus what
Yeah. Yeah.
what others
Exactly.
do. I think you have to tap into what makes sense for you as a leader.
That makes a lot of sense. And you can see why. I think, especially when you, in that gap that you just mentioned right there, is, as a leader at every level and at every size of company, obviously you care about the frontline folks. When you're small, it's easy to let them know that you care because you're seeing them every day. You're directly interacting with them. And then as you grow, you have to find a new way, and then you're growing. So like, well, I'm going to go learn how to be a leader, and you go take some leadership course, and it gives you this kind of prescriptive way that you then employ. And now everybody really thinks you don't care about them because you're like bringing in this like totally non-native to you, non-real sounding way of showing that you care. And really it's just backfiring, when really what it's about is kind of being a little bit more reflective of who you are, how you communicate, and just finding out the best way to tweak that so that it can scale, rather than just like taking somebody else's version of what it means to be a leader. Is that what that's what it sounds like you're saying?
Absolutely. And I think what you're getting at and what we're probably getting at is this level of authenticity that comes across or
Yeah.
doesn't come across.
Yeah.
So when I ask somebody about their kids, that's something that's very relatable to me. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I have young kids.
Yep.
It's a shared kind of experience. Or if I ask them about their hobbies, and in particular, if it's something that I share with them, all of a sudden that becomes very relatable. But
Yep.
trying to force every interaction into kind of this, like you said, prescriptive way, it
Yep.
doesn't work, because then that lack of authenticity comes across. And it's tapping into the shared, just like there's a shared vision around what the company is about. I think there's a shared vision about what interpersonal relationships
Yeah.
need to be about.
Yeah. It's funny because I teach modules on trust and how to build trust on teams. And it's always too bad because we get to we do all these cool exercises of, you can try this, and here's a tactic and here's a technique. And then we get to the end and I have to just be like, and really it just depends. It depends on your culture. It depends on you. It depends on your people, because ultimately what will, even for the same leader, what builds trust between these two people will break trust between these two people. And that's part of the art versus the science of being a leader. You mentioned there at the end of your answer, you touched on this idea of like kind of the culture piece and the reiteration of that. I did want to pull on that thread a little bit too, because I remember listening to an interview a few months ago with the CEO of Astroforge, another space
Mm-hmm.
startup.
Yeah.
And he was saying how basically his entire job as CEO is to keep reminding people what the mission is, of just keeping them relentlessly focused on, this is what we are doing, this is what matters, because it's easy for people to get distracted or think something else is a good idea. And they were just very focused on achieving this one very specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear, again, kind of similar question, of any examples you've used or things you've seen that can be helpful to keep reinforcing that. Because I think for all leaders, whether you're a frontline manager or the founder of a company, it's a lot. You assume everybody knows what to do, right? Like, because it makes sense to you. You just, this is the next thing that we need to do. And whether it's because they're new at the company or they have a different context or don't have as much information as you, a lot of times people don't know what to do. And it really comes down to that constant reiteration of culture and mission and how we're going to think about these things. So how have you seen that work?
Yeah, that's a great point. And I would take it even maybe, a step farther in that
Yeah.
I think a lot of times people know what to do, but they don't know why they're doing it. And
That's a good one. Yeah.
if you're going to be at any organization, be it Nisum, my organization, or some organization that is doing something completely different, the way ExoFarm is doing a very different, or is creating a very different type of offering, it's why are we here, and why are we not at a different place? And I think having very intentional methods to reinforce that becomes very critical. Yeah, at Nisum, for example, for us, it's really valuable to have interpersonal touch points
Okay.
where in small and this is a tactic. Again, this may work for
Yeah.
some and may not, but small format groups that come together and discuss whatever is relevant and topical at the time. And it's a way for people to get outside of their core work, and it's at multiple levels, and we are just sharing work that we're doing, or we're sharing work innovation that we're interested in, maybe outside of the company, or we're sharing something about our personal lives. And
Mm.
one of the big reasons for Nisum's existence is to empower individuals to have a sense of freedom and kind of controlling their own destiny. So
Mm-hmm.
for us, that is something that we are, and the Astroforge CEO's example is spot on. It's about reinforcing what we do and why we do it,
Yeah.
and a big part of that is also listening, right? So I think a big part of my work, or in the past, my work has been, some form of being a therapist, being a listener, right? And hearing what people are thinking and dealing with, and also sharing, right?
Mm-hmm.
In an authentic way where it's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate, what I'm going through, so that it becomes more about a we mindset than I'm telling you this.
Yeah.
I think having platforms for people to be heard is probably the single biggest thing organizations can do to benefit their own culture.
I love that. Two things. First, you mentioned at Nisum one of the things that you do is just providing these touch points. Practically, how like what do those look like? Are these you have a lunch session that people can opt into showing up at, that where there's a different discussion? Is there a formal thing that you're trying to create there, or how does it actually happen?
Yeah, it actually happens through, we've had different types of series where you can opt in, or sometimes we
Voluntold you.
yeah, voluntold, or ask you if you're interested.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
the idea is to have cross-functional teams, have people from different levels,
Neat.
different cultures and geographies. We have a lot of movement of people from our different offices, so it kind of
Yeah.
naturally creates an easy way to connect them.
Mm.
And we come together in the office, or for a while there it was only virtual,
Yep.
and
Yep.
we have these types of discussions. But very importantly, there's also the walking the halls. And a lot of our teams are deployed while we have folks in our offices. We also have a lot of people deployed as a consulting firm
Yeah.
at our client offices.
Yeah.
So it's walking the halls, either physical or virtual, and having discussions and brown bag sessions, and ways to connect.
Yeah.
And this is also something that you have to lean into what works well for you. So
Yeah.
one of my partners is very, very natural and very good at the walking the halls conversations, and connecting with folks. And another might be more adept at hosting forums and
Yep.
having kind of a formal session. So you need to be firing on multiple cylinders, especially as you get bigger, because people want to be seen in different ways also. Just like leaders have different kind of strengths around these types of things.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We're all circling this same idea of making sure you're doing something that's real to you and that's unique to you. Another thing that you mentioned was listening. one of the things that I always say when I'm talking to, I use I think Tim Ferriss often ends his podcasts with asking his guests the question of, if you had a metaphorical billboard that the entire world could see, what would you put on it? And I say, if I had a metaphorical billboard to put that every leader could see, it would be just stop talking. Like that's all. Just stop talking, because so much of it is, especially as a new leader, you become a manager, and you think you're trying to impress everybody, basically, or
Yep.
prove to people that you're supposed to be there. And you mentioned specifically that as a leader, listening is so important. Was that? Did you personally find that like a difficult transition to make? Are there anything in order to keep yourself from just talking all over folks when they're trying to share something?
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me that was a learned behavior, and one that
Yeah.
I constantly have to remind myself, and I need to be intentional about. Not because I'm not interested in what people have to say, but sometimes you feel initially, you're right. When you're early on as a leader, you feel like there's an imposter syndrome, and you have to prove yourself, and everyone kind of goes through that.
Yeah.
But later, it can become about making sure people feel like things are moving here, and you are facilitating. And if things are if you're not providing input or
Yeah.
guidance or wisdom immediately, then the other person or the other people may feel like this is not moving, right? Whatever the
Yeah.
movement might be.
Yeah.
So I think it's okay with, I think it's important to be okay with silence.
Yeah.
So making yourself comfortable with forums where people are kind of feeling it out, and eventually start kind of sharing and becoming more natural in the conversation, more natural in what they want to tell you as a colleague or as a leader. So I think that becomes super important. I think it's also something that is important to teach and coach your next level of leaders. It's a very
Yeah.
natural thing for everyone to kind of go down that path, and it's encouraging them to think about being an enabler and not providing directions only, or
Yeah.
feeling like it's their responsibility or their burden to drive the conversation or drive
Yeah.
the initiative, but kind of really draw on their team to drive what's going to be impactful. Because a lot of times the folks
Yeah.
on the front line understand things much in a much more nuanced way
Yeah.
than folks higher up in the organization. So I think it's just so important to tease that out and have give them those platforms to have those discussions.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. As I'm listening to you talk about this idea of silence, because I think it is so critical, I'm already imagining a workshop exercise where you're teaching people how to listen, and you just have two people talking to one another and somebody's saying their problem, and you just put a clock behind them. And when they're done talking, the whole exercise is the person playing the manager just can't talk for like 15 seconds. They just have to
Yep.
wait 15 seconds before they respond, to just get used to, because it's a hard thing. I mean, I think about this as a facilitator. It's a challenge to just sit with that silence, and it's really important.
Well, we did, or we've done a few times an exercise where our leadership team will come together and we'll have some pretty real and raw conversations. And that's a whole different bucket of intentional work. And I know
Yeah.
you're, a real expert in that area. So, you know, big topic there. But one of
Yeah.
the things that we do is provide honest, real feedback.
Yeah.
And when one person's giving the feedback, the other person just has to sit there and
Yeah.
listen to it. and not react and not defend. And it is extremely uncomfortable when you start that process. But if you start with the negative feedback, right? And you probably shouldn't call it negative feedback, whatever the
Yeah.
term is
Yeah. What if, yeah.
you're giving it.
Yeah.
But if you start there and then you pivot into the positive feedback, one thing you realize is there's usually a lot more positive, even in the most challenging
Yeah.
relationships between two
Yeah.
people. Because once you start laying out how or why you're important to me as a colleague, as a friend, as a peer, whatever it might be, as a leader, it, those things are much bigger. It's just they don't get said every day, and those negative bits come out much more commonly, either explicitly or in a passive aggressive way. So that happens, and the other big thing that we see is that the person listening stops listening to defend or respond, but just listens to listen. And I
Yeah.
think that's really valuable.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we try to do, and we found to be helpful.
Yeah. I love this. I love how much intention is put in, and I think intention is the right word with all this stuff. Whether it was the change that COVID thrust on us, or the change that any company goes through as they grow, the the thing you need to focus on is being intentional about your efforts to drive those personal connections. It's one of the things, it's the first thing that I talk to people about that I think organizations so often miss, is just how powerful personal connection can be. It solves so many problems when people feel like they are truly part of a team. It's not about, and yeah, there's a lot of discussion out there about, oh, we're a family, and oh no, we don't want to be a family, like, different things like
Right.
that. But you have to have some level of personal connection with the people you're working with the organization, if you really want to do anything great, I think.
Yeah, I think you're spot on. And I think it's important to think about, for what it's worth in terms of that analogy, the family or not family analogy. I think it's early on, almost every startup or small organization resembles a family of sorts. But
Yes.
it's about thinking where you switch to being more of a team, a sports team in particular. So
I
I
like
think
that.
I think
Yes.
that is probably a much better analogy for mid-sized
Yes.
to larger organizations, because
Yes.
now, yeah, you're not a family, let's be honest, right? But
Yeah.
you do have a common goal, scoring points in whatever way that means for
Yep.
you and your
Yep.
company. And you have people that are going to be superstars and leaders on the team. And then you're going to have role players. But the superstars need to recognize that they need those role players. They need to work with them. They need to pass the ball or sub out where it's appropriate.
Yep.
And of course, you have coaches or leadership that needs to facilitate all that. So, I think the quicker you, and like you were talking about trust and communication, all of that is baked into it. But I think the quicker an organization recognizes that mindset as they're growing and then hitting inflection points, the higher the chances of navigating some of those types of growth challenges that come your way.
Yeah. Well, this has been a fantastic conversation. It honestly went a little bit of a different direction than I think any of the other conversations I've been having have gone. So I'm really excited about that. I'm sure people will get a lot out of it. If people want to follow up with ExoFarm, where can they follow your team as you grow?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, of course.
Yeah,
Sajid Mohamedy, it's probably in the uh, bio
in the
there.
description. Yep, yep,
Yeah, and our website is exofarm.space. The other company we've been talking about, where we've seen a lot of
yep,
growth over the last
yep.
decade and a half, is Nisum, nisum.com.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, Sajid. It's been great chatting with you.
Likewise, thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to today's show. If you are looking for help turning your organization's great engineers into great managers, me and my team at Better Everyday Studios would love to help. We deliver targeted and interactive training workshops that are designed to help build the 3 fundamental skills of any new manager: building trust, giving feedback, and setting goals. Reach out to me through matt@bettereverydaystudios.com so we can start making your organization better every day.